Hi everyone! Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite bands, as you may be able to tell by the shirt. We're talking CREEDENCE CLEARWATER REVIVAL. Now, I've had the pleasure of spending the last 2 weeks listening to their discography to come up with the cream of the crop. I'm calling this, undeniably, the top 10 best CREEDENCE CLEARWATER REVIVAL songs. And, to stir things up a little bit, I'll have my pick for an overrated song at the end. But in the meantime, let's get to the top 10. At number 10, we have Someday Never Comes from Mardi Gras. The beginning of the list starts with the end of CREEDENCE CLEARWATER REVIVAL. 1972's Mardi Gras would be their final album together. Rhythm guitarist Tom Fogerty had left the group the year before, following the album Pendulum. Lead guitarist and frontman John Fogerty had a reputation for running a tight ship. He would not only write the songs, he would produce them with a singular focus, often overdubbing vocals, guitars, and pianos himself. The remaining 2 members, bassist Stu Cook and drummer Doug Clifford, voiced their frustrations that their creative input was being diminished. With the tension hanging around, Fogerty gave Clifford and Cook the keys to the Cadillac. The remaining trio would all write their own originals for the next LP. Naturally, the results are underwhelming. Cook and Clifford had never written their own compositions before, and they lack character. Meanwhile, John had been writing songs for a decade, and his tunes are the album's saving grace. Someday Never Comes would be the last single released by CREEDENCE, and it's a fitting coda to the group's impending dissolution. The lyrics are about a different separation, a breakup of John Fogerty's marriage. The theme that permeates the song is an unbreakable circle. The narrator's father left him saying, "Someday you'll understand." He grows up and says the same tragic goodbye to his own son, like it was all predetermined. But he knows the words are hollow, on the chorus crooning, "Someday never comes." The verses are a swaying, country-tinged ballad that picks up considerable steam on the anxious shuffle of the chorus. The shifting dynamics add drama to the song's emotional heft. Filled with Fogerty's impassioned, anguished vocals and affecting, carefully considered lyrics, Someday Never Comes was the bittersweet goodbye to CREEDENCE CLEARWATER REVIVAL. At number 9, we have Bad Moon Rising from Green River. While their swampy music sounded like it came from the Deep South, the band were from the Bay Area in Northern California, raised in a small working-class town known as El Cerrito, not too far from San Francisco. The trio of John, Stu, and Doug met in high school and would first form a band in 1959 named the Blue Velvets. The group backed John's older brother Tom on a few occasions before he officially joined, setting up the classic quartet lineup. After one of their songs got picked up by disc jockey legend Casey Kasem, the buzz would earn them a deal with Fantasy Records. The group would temporarily be renamed the Gollywogs, a terrible name, even before considering the objectionable racist origins of the character where it was derived from. When Fantasy changed owners in 1967, they took the opportunity to rebrand, and would be christened CREEDENCE CLEARWATER REVIVAL. The third word being key. They had been playing together almost a decade at that point, and they referred to this as a renewed commitment, their last chance to really go for it. While early on Tom was the lead singer, by the time they became CCR, John would become the primary songwriter and voice for the group. On Bad Moon Rising, John would say he was inspired by a scene from the film The Devil and Daniel Webster, where a hurricane wipes out a town. The lyrics are apocalyptic. Fogerty warns of rage and ruin, and rivers overflowing, and even morbidly sings, "Hope you are quite prepared to die." The yin-yang dichotomy of the dire lyrics with the song's bouncy upbeat melody is stark. The shining major chord guitar strums and Doug Clifford's sturdy hoedown gallet give the band momentum to drive right through the heart of the storm. Never have tumultuous times sounded so inviting. Bad Moon Rising is an exciting earworm and a toast to the end of the world. At number 8, we have Looking Out My Back Door from Cosmo's Factory. From the very beginning, the 4 lads' work ethic is what really set the group apart from their peers. When they reconvened and changed their name, they also took stock of the burgeoning flower power Haight-Ashbury scene that had exploded in San Francisco. The band swore never to use the hippies' psychedelics, stay focused, and work twice as hard to become successful. When they started out, they rehearsed in a shed in Doug Clifford's backyard. Clifford's nickname was Cosmo, and the rehearsal space would eventually be dubbed the Factory, after John Fogerty insisted on practicing for hours nearly every day. Doug would remark, "It's better than working at a factory," and the name stuck. The title of their 5th LP would be an homage to their backyard shack. Fogerty's dogged dedication to songwriting would lead him to pen a prolific string of hits. His writing process was almost like that of a monk. He would sit in his apartment and stare at the bare, beige wall all night long until a tune materialized. He would say peering at the blank canvas made him able to conjure a personal place deep in his soul. While the colorful imagery of looking at my back door, filled with elephants and magicians, was read by many at the time as a counterculture slang, its origins are much more benign. John had a 3-year-old son and wanted to make a song he might enjoy singing along to, going as far to incorporate a book he read as a child. To think that I saw it on Mulberry Street by Dr. Seuss. The refrain is so simple, it's no wonder it was aimed at kids. Do, 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 looking out my back door. The short song is a concise burst of sunshine. Fogerty plucks a twangy melody on a dobro, along the upbeat tumbleweed tempo. The song is more vintage country western than modern acid rock, more along the lines of Buck Owens than Jefferson Airplane. Yet another reason that CCR stood out among their contemporaries. Looking Out My Back Door is an unabashed throwback to the golden sounds of AM radio that showed why Creedence's iconoclastic sound transcended its time. At number 7, we have Born on the Bayou from Bayou Country. I wasn't around in the 60s, but Creedence Clearwater Revival always seemed like a clunky name to me. It could have been worse. Other contending names included Muddy Rabbit and Gossamer Wump, as well as Creedence Newball and the Ruby, which the band would use to derive their final name. Stu Cook would say part of the reason they arrived at the name was that it was weirder than Buffalo Springfield or Jefferson Airplane. The useful thing about the name, though, was it obscured the fact that they were a quartet of California kids. On Born on the Bayou, the band plays a winding Cajun crawfish slow boil over a steady riverboat churning rhythm. John Fogerty had never been to Creole country, let alone a bayou, so he based the song on what he read out of an encyclopedia and the New Orleans R&B and Delta blues records he adored. By mythologizing a muggy childhood deep in the South, a man who had hardly left the Golden State practically created Southern rock. The hypnotic tremolo guitar line that starts the song sounds like it's slithering out of the swamp. Fogerty plays the part of a ghost hunter along the water as he chases down a hoodoo there. The rhythm is as laid back as a late August afternoon. Stu Cook's heavy hold notes glide, and Doug Clifford's simple, straightforward beat keeps the current chugling, even stripping it down after the bridge to a bare metronome cowbell clank. Nothing wrong with adding some more cowbell. Born on the Bayou is hot and humid Louisiana blues that is as American as cold beers on the 4th of July. At number 6, we have Run Through the Jungle from Cosmo's Factory. John Fogerty was still a teenager when he signed away the distribution and publishing rights to his future songs to Fantasy Records. Stu Cook, a business major, would later call it the worst deal in the music business. Once Creedence broke up, John Fogerty refused to play any of the group's material, stating he didn't want to pay performance royalties to perform his own tunes. Music mogul Saul Zaentz effectively owned Fogerty's timeless songs, but even that wasn't enough. He would end up suing John in the 80s, claiming that the song The Old Man Down the Road sounded too much like Run Through the Jungle, basically claiming Fogerty was plagiarizing himself. Thankfully, the jury ruled in John's favor, but the legal struggle to get his music back would take 50 years. It was only last year, in 2023, that Fogerty would finally officially control the songs he wrote with CCR. On Run Through the Jungle, the rhythm moves at a creeping pace that makes it sound like danger is imminent. While some would take the title and previous protest songs like Fortunate Son to assume this was about the Vietnam War, in truth, Fogerty explained it was actually about the proliferation of guns in the United States. Though he was a hunter himself, he thought the country had gone gun crazy, and it was madness to consider how many citizens were walking around strapped. On the song, he howls, 200 million guns are loaded, Satan Christ take aim. The tune never changes key, yet filled with bluesy blowing harmonica and rattling studio effects, it has an arresting cinematic feel. In the uneasy atmosphere, you could feel the chilling horror in Fogerty's voice as he warns, the devil's on the loose. Run Through the Jungle is a pulsing paranoid thriller that keeps you on the edge of your seat. At number 5, we have Down on the Corner from Willie and the Poor Boys. In 1969, it could be argued that Creedence Clearwater Revival were the biggest band in the world, not named the Beatles. They had 4 hit singles and 3 top 10 albums. Their last album of the year, Willie and the Poor Boys, arrived a mere 3 months after their previous, Green River, and was the band's 4th straight million-selling LP. Similarly to how the Fab Four became Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Creedence assumed the identity of Willie and the Poor Boys, an old-time jug band. On the cover, you could see the fictional buskers playing outside the Duck Key Market that was close to the studio. And they even made an appearance on a program called The Music Scene, complete with a washboard, gut bass, and Kalamazoo. Though unsurprisingly, the thin theme doesn't run very far into the album. Down on the Corner tells us all we need to know about Willie and the Poor Boys, Rooster, Blinky, and Poor Boy himself. Yes, apparently one of the Poor Boys was named Poor Boy. The lyrics are almost beside the point. The gents take it to the street and play their bluesy homespun ragtime for some spare nickels. The instruments sound intentionally unplugged, with the twin guitars' vinyl strings plucked in a catchy melodic riff, in unison with Stu Cook's walking bass. On the chorus, John Fogerty overdubbed multiple vocal tracks to create the effect he was harmonizing with himself, giving it an ear-pleasing punch that really makes it stand out compared to the verses. The two-stepping swing, combined with the impossibly catchy melody, makes a song so positively chipper, it's infectious. Down on the Corner is a toe-tapping calypso clapper that is irrepressibly upbeat. And number 4, we have Green River from the album of the same name. If all the albums and hit singles weren't enough, in 1969, CCR also were one of the main headliners for Woodstock. They were the first major act to agree to play the festival, and a major selling point for other bands to sign on to the eventual Megaville. The band wouldn't go on until 3 a.m. on the second day, where John Fogerty recalled 500,000 dazed and confused kids asleep and covered in mud. In the distance, he saw a flickering lighter and heard, "Don't worry about it, John, we're with you." Fogerty would say he played the rest of the set for that dedicated fan. Deliriously tired, probably a little fried, but still ready to rock. Fogerty probably saw some of himself in that fan. He was a devoted student of rock and roll. He would call Green River his favorite Creedence album because he intentionally crafted it as a tribute to the sound of vintage 50s Sun Records LPs, like the releases by Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash. On the title track, he takes cues from those sweltering Memphis sessions to play some grimy rhythm and blues. John would say he came up with the twangy guitar riff and it sounded like a Green River, so the way the melody came to him inspired the fond lyrics. The Fogerty brothers trade off guitar licks over a sweaty, driving rhythm that burns with a feel-good vibe, with John reminiscing about a vacation when he was a kid. He vividly paints details of the catfish and bullfrogs, and it's clear that the memories of the serene, shallow waters are healing to his soul. Green River is a grooving, southern fried boogie that invites us to keep our own happy place never too far from our minds, and always close to our hearts. And number 3, we have You Ever Seen the Rain from Pendulum. Following their huge year in '69, CCR kept charging full steam ahead. They would release another 2 albums in 1970, Cosmo's Factory in July and Pendulum in December. The band had never been hotter, but the internal tensions kept boiling. John would slightly release his iron grip on Pendulum. For the first time, instead of overdubbing the album all by himself, other members of the band contributed parts as well. In the past, the band had learned the songs on the road prior to tracking. For this record, they learned them in the studio, so the LP would take a full month to record, an eternity by Creedence's usual standards. Despite the half-hearted olive branch from John, Tom Fogerty would leave the band shortly after the recordings wrapped. On Have You Ever Seen the Rain, John was already addressing his imminent departure. In addition to his bass duties, Stu Cook plays a loping heavy piano. The lyrics start with John hinting about turmoil. Someone told me long ago, there's a calm before the storm. I know it's been coming for some time. The acoustic guitar strums shimmer, along with Cook's perky bass line. Midway through, John adds a humming Hammond B3 organ, in a nod to the great Stax house band, Booker T and the MGs, who the group had jammed with during the sessions. The electric organ gives the song an earthy gospel pull. On the chorus, his voice yearns as he ponders the rhetorical question, I wanna know, have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? It's a sly acknowledgement that even though the band was at its peak, dark clouds were hovering on the horizon. Have You Ever Seen the Rain is a cagey yet heartfelt goodbye to a brother, with a beautiful melancholy melody that lingers like a sun shower. At number 2, we have Proud Mary from Bayou Country. In 1966, the band would be impacted because of something that changed many young men's trajectories: the Vietnam War. Both John Fogerty and Doug Clifford would be drafted into the armed forces. John would join the U.S. Army Reserve, while Clifford would enlist with the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve. While in training, Fogerty would carry around a notebook with titles he thought could make good songs. Among them were Riverboat, Rolling on a River, and Proud Mary. Some of John's service would overlap with his time with CCR, and he was actively trying to get out of the assignment. One fateful day, he finally got a letter from Uncle Sam saying he was being honorably discharged, and he was over the moon. Fogerty would say that very day he picked up a guitar, and once he started strumming, Proud Mary started pouring out of him, line by line. He would say by the time he hit upon the Rolling on the River refrain, he knew he had written his best song yet. He could feel the song's supernatural energy. John wasn't the only one who thought it was a hit. Proud Mary would be covered 35 times in 1969 alone, with dozens more since. The most impressive being the incredible Tina Turner versions from 1971 that starts as swaying soul and explodes into an ecstatic, hip-shaking party. Her powerhouse take is every bit as essential as the original. On Proud Mary, John wrote a proletariat tale of our narrator leaving a steady job in the city to search for something greater. Stu Cook's bass line bubbles along, with Doug Clifford's unhurried shuffle. Tom Fogerty's acoustic drums bright major chords, with John adding jazzy melodic riffs. John imitates his best Howlin' Wolf southern drawl as he calls out, "Big wheel, keep on turning, Proud Mary, keep on burning," leading to the gospel-tinged refrain, "Rollin', rollin', rollin' on a river." With well-crafted lyrics full of earnest honesty and an easy riverboat rhythm, the song sounds like the beginning to a romantic adventure. Proud Mary is a powerful, big-hearted working-class anthem and a timeless, all-American classic. At number 1, we have Fortunate Son from Willie and the Poor Boys. Often seen as a patriotic tune, Fortunate Son is really a defiant, anti-establishment fight song. Despite their opposition to the Vietnam War, it's not really an anti-war anthem. It was written for the blue-collar common folk. Fogerty would say it was more about the unfairness of class in society, echoing the old adage, rich men make war and poor men fight them. Fogerty was no fan of warmonger Richard Nixon, and his daughter would marry the grandson of another former president in 1968. John would say watching this crassly political display would inspire the fire in Fortunate Son. He knew these children of privilege wouldn't be the ones on the front lines. On Fortunate Son, Fogerty sneers, "It ain't me, it ain't me, I ain't no senator's son." He aims his gaze at the masters of war with their star-spangled eyes that push world pain for profit. The song kicks off with Stu Cook's driving bass and a mile-wide guitar riff. Dripping in feedback, it sounds like a Boeing 747, and when Doug Clifford picks up the drum fills into the verses, the song really takes flight. John is agitated and emotional as he decries those born with a silver spoon in hand, and pointedly asks, "Lord, don't they help themselves?" Then he rails against the elites that send the young and poor off to war, all while enriching themselves and asking for more, more, more. Rarely has rock and roll sounded so revolutionary. The passionate vocals, poignant words, and white-hot rhythm deliver a stirring message to rise up, make your voice heard, and fight for what you believe in. Fortunate Son is an utterly fantastic, foundation-rocking rally cry for the working class, full of fury and righteous rock and roll. It's an incredibly invigorating shot of distortion-soaked adrenaline and Creedence Clearwater Revival at their very best. And now, I'll add 2 songs that almost made the list. The first is Lodi. Released as the B-side to Bad Moon Rising, Lodi is one of the most beloved tunes from CCR. John Fogerty would only be 23 years old when he wrote this tale of an aging troubadour. It was a reflection on the very early days of the group, where the band would drive up and down the California highways to middle-of-nowhere towns to play for indifferent crowds. Drummer Doug Clifford said they played the town of Lodi once, but the intoxicated locals kept telling them to turn down. Fogerty uses the location to sing from the vantage point of a down-and-out musician stuck in the small-town circuit. Lodi has an up-tempo country western rhythm with world-weary lyrics. Our narrator sets out on the road, seeking my fame and fortune, looking for a pot of gold. But eventually he runs out of money and time. Each verse ends with John singing the woeful refrain, "Oh Lord, stuck in Lodi again," as if he is doomed to this purgatory. Lodi is a ballad of a hard-luck loser with vivid, detailed lyrics that make the singer's struggle universally relatable. The other near miss would be Travelin' Band. It's a ripping rocker about the hectic globe-trotting life the band was thrust into. It's fueled with youthful excitement. The tempo sounds like the band is in a rush to leave. It's rockabilly rhythm played in double time, with John singing like he's trying to catch his breath as he howls, "Flying across the land, trying to get a hand, playing in a traveling band." Fogerty himself plays both the pounding piano and the blaring horns that amp up the tune's intensity. Travelin' Band is a wild rock and roll rave up that is an absolute blast, and it deserves to be mentioned among their best. Finally, let's talk about what I consider to be Creedence Clearwater Revival's most overrated song, and that is their cover of I Heard It Through the Grapevine. I've already talked up 12 all-time classics from CCR, yet for some reason, this cover is one of their most in rotation on radio. And while it's good, it's not nearly as amazing as the songs I listed. Let's start with the fact that it's 11 minutes long. In the span of 11 minutes, you could easily fit 3 of any of the songs I mentioned. Creedence played short, punchy tunes. They were the kings of economy, which is another reason this cover tends to wear out its welcome. Even if you hear their live recordings from Oakland to the Royal Albert Hall, the band plays the songs as they are for the most part. They weren't the Grateful Dead. So when you stretch a song that Marvin Gaye sang masterfully for 3 minutes, you really have to pad the length with their jam session. The boys aren't technically polished virtuosos, so the long instrumental passages amount to a lot of guitar noodling, at times simply reinforcing the song's melody. I'm sure Fogerty thought they were channeling some of his favorite blues artists, but there isn't a lot of emotion in the guitar solos. It never feels particularly urgent. Their breakthrough single, the cover of Susie Q, in my opinion, is a much better spin on a bluesy classic. Taking it in a more psychedelic direction suits the song, and the guitar textures really set a trippy tone. I Heard It Through the Grapevine was definitely the band trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle. With Creedence in their prime, it's still an enjoyable listen, but personally, there are an easy dozen of songs I'd rather hear first. Yet somehow, I Heard It Through the Grapevine is among CCR's top 5 most played on the radio, and their 7th most popular tune on YouTube. To me, it's a little overrated. As you're still watching, I wanted to share a deep cut as well. For that, I'm shining a light on Call It Pretending. Against the label's advice, CCR often released double A-sides, rather than adding a B-side to their current single. So when you bought their 45s, you got 2 hits for the price of 1. It also means they had very few non-album tracks. One standout, though, was Call It Pretending. Recorded in 1967, it would be released as the flip side to the single Porterville, while the band was still known as the Gollywogs. The song wouldn't see a digital release until 2001's massive 6-CD retrospective box set. It's an incredible, overlooked firecracker. Call It Pretending might seem disorienting at first. The majority of their catalog is heavily indebted to Little Richard's Southern R&B and Muddy Waters' Chicago soul. This tune is less gritty and more polished, like the northern soul of Motown. The drums have the huge Phil Spector wall of sound, and John's vocals are aided by backup harmonies that sweeten the melody. While a little different from what they would soon evolve into, Call It Pretending showed the early kinetic sparks of Creedence. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely check it out. So there you have it. That was undeniably the top 10 best Creedence Clearwater Revival songs. So, how wrong was I? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your list look like? Do you think I Heard It Through the Grapevine is one of their best songs? Let me know. And if there's any songs I missed, let me know in the comments below. Hope you stick around, and thank you for watching. Stu Cook's bassline bubbles along with Doug Clifford. To play for indefinite. I don't know why I keep getting that.
Poor boy and the poor boy band.
They couldn't even come up with 4 names. They're like Willie and the Poor Boys. It's like, okay, who are the Poor Boys? It's like, we got Rooster.
We got Rooster.
We got Blinky and Poor Boy. It's like, Poor Boy? Can't he have a name? Like, I don't know, Rusty? It's like, no, we're good. We're good.